In this video, we're going to be looking at a verbal reasoning question type called codes transference. Some of this material has been taken from our verbal reasoning books, which you can find linked in the video description alongside a free PDF with 20 questions for you to practice after this video. Let's take a look at the explanation from the book. Now, these questions are about cracking codes, and in these questions you get given 4 words and 3 number codes. A number code matches up to a word. Now, because there's 4 words and only 3 codes, you're missing a number code for one of the words. So it's up to us to figure out what each number represents in terms of letters. So the very first thing that I would do is write down your digits from 0 going all the way up to 9. We call this, in our textbook, we call this a magic box. So for now, ignore the words and jot down the numbers that you have. So over here we have 0, we have 1, 3, 4, 7, 8 and 9. Once you've done that, go back to the words and you want to start by looking for repeating letters in the same set. So if you look here, first word we have is sofa. I don't see any repeating letters over here. In the second word we have fans. Again, I can't see any repeating letters. Over here I do, test, right? There's a T at the beginning and a T at the end. What that means is that we should have a number code where the starting number and the end number are the same. Can we spot that in any of the number codes? 7904, no. 0487, no. 1371, yes. Now, are there any other words that have repeating letters? No, oats doesn't. So I know for sure that 1371 must be the number code for test. So what we do with that information is we come down to the magic box and we start filling out the appropriate letters. So the number 1 must represent T. The number 3 must represent E. The number 7 must represent S. And as we've mentioned, 1 must represent T. So I'd come down to the number box, I'd fill that in. So if you have a look, right, I've started filling my box in over there. Now that we have the code for test, we can use some of the numbers to start figuring out the codes for the other words. So we know that 7 is represented by S, we know 3 is represented by E, and 1 represents T. So if we come back down, I know that the code for sofa must begin with 7. I know that the code for fans must end with a 7, and I know that the code for oats must end with a 17. If you go back to the number codes, you'll see that we actually have a number code that starts with 7, and there's only 1, so this 7904 must be for sofa. We also have only 1 code that ends with a 7, 0487, so that must be the code for fans. So once again, you can come to your magic box, fill in all of the numbers and letters that you do know. We have done that below over here, and you can see our completed number box over here. Now with the completed number box, you can use that to generate the codes for the other words. So for oats, I know that 9 represents O, so I can come back here and I can say that that must be 9. I know that A must be 4, so I can come and say that that is the code for oats should be 9417. As is the case for many verbal reasoning questions, there's more than one way to tackle the questions. We'll see a few different ways in the examples that we have coming up. Choose whichever method you like and whichever method you feel works best for you. The 4 words that we have are sell, tall, stew, lost. The 3 number codes, 5827, 4358, 8644. Remember, try and see if you can find the same letters in a word. So I can spot over here that we have 2 L's in sell, 2 L's in tall. So we've got repeating letters. Do we have any number codes where the last 2 numbers are the same? We do. If you have a look here, 8644, that can only be the code for either sell or tall, right? Because stew and lost, they don't end in the same letters. So 8644 must be for either sell or for tall. At the moment, we don't know. So you might want to just on top of the words, just write down, okay, L is 4, that's 4, that's 4, that's 4. Okay, do we have any other words that contain an L? We do. We have lost. So lost begins with a 4. Let's now have a scan through and see, do we have any number codes that start with a 4? Yes, we do. We have 4358. So 4358 has to be for lost. So let's come back over here. I'm going to write 3, 5, 8. You can see so far I haven't done this by drawing a number box. So now that we know that 4358 is for lost, you can have a look and you can see that S is represented by the digit 5. And so our code of 5827, that can only be for stew. We know it can't be for cell because cell has to end with 2 4s. So in other words, we have that 5827 is for stew, and therefore 8644 must be for tool. You can now figure out the code for cell. We know that S is represented by 5, and if you have a look across at stew, you'll see that E is represented by the number 2. So the code for cell must be 5244. Using that information, we can answer the questions A, B, and C. So for question A, find the code for the word woes. Well, let's have a look. W is 7, O is 3, E is 2, and S is 5. So that's our code for woes. Let's have a look at question B. So find the word for the code 5648. Well, we know that 5 is S. We know that 6 is A. We know that 4 is L. And 8 is T. So the word is salt. Now just a quick tip, if you are asked for a word, make sure that you do have a word that's correctly spelt. So just check your spelling. So salt, right? We know that that's a word. A quick tip with these questions, sometimes you'll get asked for the code, sometimes you'll get asked for the word. So just make sure that you read the question carefully and that you're, if you're asked to give a code, you're giving a number code. And if you're asked to give a word, you're giving, letters. Let's look at the last question. So we have, find the code for the word lowest. Right, so L is 4, O is 3, W is 7, E is 2, S is 5, and T is 8. Okay, so that's our first example done. Let's have a look at the second example. Now for the second example, I am going to go back to using the number box, or as we call it, the magic box. Okay, so example 2. Maybe a slightly harder example. I'm going to set up my number box first. To remember, just write the digits 0 to 9. And now I'll take a look at the words. So I have bore, soap, scar, and ribs. Let's see if we can find repeating letters. Now, if you have a look in each word, for this particular example, I can't see any repeating letters, right? In bore, in soap, in scar, or ribs. So the next thing that you should look for is the same letter, but in different words and in the same position. So I can spot over here that I have an S and an S. So I have repeating S's. Do I have 2 number codes that start with the same letter then? Yes, I have 9678, 9471. So I know because they start with the same number, they must be represented by S. Can't be bore or ribs because they don't start with the same letter. So S must be 9. So I can come back down here and I can write that S must be 9. We can also see A is a repeating letter. It's also in the same position in 3 of the words. So there's an A in bore, an A in soap, and an A in scar. So do we have the third number the same in the number codes? Well, over here I have a 7, over here I have a 7, right? And we already know that one of these is for soap and one of these is for scar. We don't have a 7 in the third position over here. So that implies, or you should be able to infer from that, that this code 1329 must be for ribs, right? There isn't a 7 in the third position over there. So ribs must be for 1329. So I'm going to come down over here and I'm going to write down the letters that are represented for ribs, or the numbers that are represented. So 1 is going to be R, 3 will be I, 2 will be B, and we already know that 9 is S. Now that we know that the code for ribs is 1329, we can start filling in all of the letters that we know the numbers for on top of the words. So ribs, 1, 3, 2, 9. Like I said, we know that S is 9, so I'm going to come and say that's 9, that's 9. We know that B is represented by 2, so I can come here and say that's 2. We know that R is represented by 1. Anywhere else you see an R, stick a 1, so there. Now, this should indicate that the code for SCAR is 9471. We can come back and write that as well, 9471. Again, we can come back to your magic box and start filling that in. So C is represented by the number 4. A is represented by the number 7. And I think that's it for now. That means that 9678 must be for the word soap. So we can come back to soap and say 9678. And again, you can go back down to your number box and start filling that in. So 6 is represented by O. 5 is, I don't think we have, do we have 5? Okay, so there's no 5 in this example. You won't always need to use every single digit from 0 to 9. So this is an example of where that's the case. 8 is represented by the letter P. And that's it. Let's go back and fill in the code for ball. So ball, O is 6 and A is 7. Okay, so we have all of the number codes for all of the words. Let's take a look at the questions. So the first question, find the code for the word crab. So C we know is 4, R we know is 1, A we know is 7, and B we know is 2. Question B, find the word for the code 9871. So if you look at your magic box, 9 is S, 8 is P, 7 is A, and 1 is R, SPAR. And the last question, find the word for the code 46217. It's going to be a 5-letter word. So 4 is C, 6 is O, 2 is B, 1 is R, 7 is A. And let's have a look at the next question now, question 3. Right, so our 4 words, fade, acre, oath, and deer, are 3 number codes, 1480, 4250, 3476. Once again, I'm going to jot down the numbers 0 to 9 and then create that little magic box for myself. So we go 0. Remember, we may not need to use all of these digits, but it's still useful to write them down. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Thankfully, I can count today. Now, let's start with looking for the same letter in the same set. Can we find repeating letters this time? No, not in fade. No repeating letters in acre. No repeating letters in oath. And no repeating letters in deer. Next thing, see if you can find the same letter in the same position of different words. So I can spot that 2 of the words end in an E. Oath ends in a H. Deer ends in an R. Right, so do I have 2 number codes where the last number is the same? Yes, 1480 and 4250. So fade and acre must be represented by those 2 number codes. So the very first thing we'll do is we'll write down what E is, because we know that E must be 0. So if we come back to our number box, we can say that E must be 0. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say that must be E. At the same time, you can come back and you can write that on top of the word. So 0 and 0. Do we have any other repeating letters in the same position? Not that I can see. There is an E in deer, so I'm going to come and write a 0 over there. If you have a look at your number codes, you'll see there is no number code currently where the second digit is a 0. That implies that the code for oath is already there. The code for oath must be 3476. We can write that on top of oath, 3476. And at the same time, we can start filling in our magic box. So A is 4, T is 7, H is 6. Does that help us work out any of the other codes? Let's see. So we have in the word fade, we have an A, so I know that the second number should be 4. And have a look there. One of the number codes is 1480. this must be for fade. We can come and say 1, 4, 8, 0. Again, we can start filling in our magic box. So we have 1 is F, D is 8, and I think that's it. And then for acre, acre must be 4250. So 4250. Again, you can fill in your magic box. So C is 2, 5 is R, and 3, we didn't fill in before, but 3 is O. So you can see we don't have a letter for 9. I'll come back to that in a second. But we're now in a position to answer questions A and B. So question A, find the code for the word tier or tier. So T is 7, E is 0, sorry. A is 4, and R is 5. Question B, find the word for the code 80235. So 8 is D, 0 is E, 2 is C, 3 is O, and 5 is R. Decor is the word. And the last question, find the code for the word peach. And you might realize over here, we don't have a number for peach. That means it must be 9. 9 is the only remaining digit. So 9 must be the digit for P. So I'm going to say over here 9. We have the digits for all of the other letters. So for E, it's 0. For A, it's 4. For C, it's 2. And for H, it's 6. Right, so the answer is 90426. A quick tip for those of you who are doing 11 plus exams, and in particular multiple choice papers. If you spot this in a multiple choice paper, let's take question A for example, right, where you had to find the code for the word tear. When you're calculating the code, right, if you spot that there is only one answer option that begins with 7 and 0, well, don't bother wasting your time working out what A and R are. Just go ahead and circle 7045 as your answer, right? It'll save yourself a little bit of time, and that time can be valuable. You can put that towards other questions. I hope you found that useful. Don't forget you can download the free 20 question PDF via the link in the description, as well as a copy of the full verbal reasoning books. To watch another verbal reasoning video, click on one of these boxes and don't forget to like and subscribe.